The Looksmaxxing obsession shows how superficial society is, which is saying something because it always has been, but there's definitely been a progression or increase in superficiality in recent times. Looksmaxxing has always been a thing, but for some reason in modern times we have terms for everything. People have always tried to look better and increase their attractiveness, but now more than ever, there's a spotlight on looks and their perceived importance. I think it's important we understand how we got here in the first place. I think it goes back to 2020, when everyone was in lockdown and we all had to speak to each other over Zoom, and we became a lot more conscious of how we look on camera. Because people were looking at themselves so much on video calls, we ended up with Zoom face. Everyone scrutinizing themselves a lot more, and their insecurities became a lot more pronounced. Another factor during this period was that everyone had so much more free time, which means everyone was consuming a lot more online content, and a lot of that content was to do with skincare, hair care, or fitness and home workouts. So already we have a lot more scrutiny around how people look, and there's a lot more information to fix those things. Even though this new information was good and it was helpful to a lot of people, it's going to make people a lot more insecure because they're going to constantly think, okay, this is a way I can become more attractive, or this is a way I can improve my looks. Through COVID times, there was a lot more consumption of online content, and specifically self-improvement content. Self-improvement content had a massive surge, and there was a lot more information in the men's space. Self-improvement content isn't inherently bad, but attached to it there's going to be the aspect of dating and attracting women. And with the topic as broad as this, everyone's going to have their own opinion and take on the things that you should do. Around the same time, you have red pill content trying to explain the nature of women to young men and how dating works. I think at some point red pill content and self-improvement content definitely overlapped, especially when it comes to talking about dating. A lot of these content creators would talk about things like sexual market value or SMV. And within talking about a topic like this, obviously the aspect of looks would come up. So a lot of the content became how to improve your attractiveness as a guy, whether that's through fashion, hygiene, or fitness. In these spaces, the importance of looks would definitely be emphasized, giving examples of how someone like a Chad, someone that's muscular and tall, would be treated in comparison to what some people might call a Jeffrey, someone that doesn't look so good, and how they would be treated. So even though a lot of the content wouldn't teach solely to focus on your looks, that still was a large aspect. But I think some of the talking points in this space definitely are a big contributing factor. For example, the fact that the dating market is cutthroat and you need to have a certain sexual market value if you want to have any success. You need to be in the top 20% of men, you need to be in the top 10% of men. The bottom 80-90%, they don't even get looked at. A lot of those ideas were very trendy, and that's something that was constantly pushed within these male spaces, the red pill space, self-improvement space, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not necessarily here to disagree with that. I'm just saying those are the conversations that were being put out there, which is what is a big contributing factor to the overall looks is the most important thing. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with any of these talking points or conversations from these spaces, but that's a big contributing factor to why we have the whole Looksmaxxing focus today that we do. Adjacent to these self-improvement spaces, you have the fitness and bodybuilding culture, which puts a lot of pressure on young men and boys to look like Action Man, to look like Superman. There's definitely a lot more content online around male fitness, and that probably puts a lot of pressure on young boys to look a certain way. That's why now there's an increase in steroid use amongst young men. Fitness and bodybuilding isn't necessarily bad, but its increased presence online definitely puts a pressure on younger people to feel like they have to reach a certain goal or they have certain expectations of them. There's absolutely no problem with having those goals. I go to the gym myself, obviously, or I hope you can tell that. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But when it becomes your sole focus, that's when it can become a bit unhealthy. There's nothing wrong with putting a lot of effort to achieve your goals, but when you feel like you have to go down other routes or use other methods to achieve that goal, that's when it can become harmful. I think another factor that contributes to the Looksmaxxing obsession that people have today is the increase in content just around being pretty. It's very obvious that if you look a certain way, you're going to get further ahead. When it comes to content, that is. It's very obvious to see that if you look a certain way, you're a lot more likely to be successful online. And people have realized this. They've realized if you look a certain way, then it's going to be easier to amass a certain following. It's going to be easier to get a large amount of views. People have strongly acknowledged that pretty privilege is a real thing in our society. A lot of the content that a young man might see online is women falling over an attractive guy, someone like Marlon or Duke Dennis. You might see videos of people saying that they have aura or Riz or whatever you want to call it. Consciously or subconsciously, this conveys to people that, okay, if I'm attractive, then I'm going to have great outcomes. I'm going to get everything I want. People start to think, okay, if I look a certain way, then I'm going to have the same outcomes as this person. And this takes us to the black pill content that tells us that looks is the only thing that matters. If you don't have particular traits or attributes, or your face is in a certain way, or your structure is in a certain way, then you have no chance with women. That you have to get limb lengthening surgery or plastic surgery for whatever, and then you might have a chance. Then you might be a 5 out of 10. It's just pure pessimism and perceiving looks as to be the only thing that's important. The black pill is meant to be accepting the reality of the world, and that if you don't look a certain way, then you're not going to get treated well. That if you don't have good genes or weren't born a certain way, then you should just give up. So again, what have we ended up with? The perception that looks is the only thing that matters. Another piece of content that I wanted to touch on, which I think does play a part in people's Looksmaxxing obsession, is a channel like Co's, something that analyzes facial attractiveness and tells you where people are lagging in certain areas. It tells you what the perfect facial structure is, it tells you what the perfect haircut is, what the perfect eye tilt is. None of these things matter. A lot of these things you can't even change. I wouldn't say they don't matter, but a lot of these things you can't even change. Like, there's no point in worrying about whether your eyes tilt 5 degrees left or right. Like, it's not the end of the world. But I think even though you're looking at things through a scientific lens, which obviously can be helpful, I think it does lead to an obsession over one's looks. Having so much information is not always a good thing. When it comes to attractiveness, all you need to focus on is being as healthy as possible. Given how society is now, looks are important, but if you don't have any depth or any other attributes, you won't go very far. Focusing solely on looks will in fact make your ego fragile and make you insecure. Bodybuilders are a very good example of this. Just aim to be healthy, physically and mentally. Don't worry about bone smashing or limb lengthening surgery. I'll see you later, guys. I'm gonna go ice my face.